Joining me, Tara Mahler, spokesperson and senior policy advisor with the Counter-Extremism Project. Tara, help us get inside the mind of the attacker here. And then from that neighbor, saying he's a nice guy, I would never think of anything like this. Is that the type of individual that typically falls into this profile, the MO?
Usually there are some signs. The neighbor might not be aware of those, but those close to this individual probably may have seen signs, unless that this was done really under the radar. Usually radicalization signs can perhaps be seen through online activity, through the types of materials that individuals are viewing or perhaps sharing with their associates. The interesting thing here is we don't really know if these individuals were in contact with terrorist affiliates, if they were inspired. We don't know yet if they were acting alone, the three of them, or if they're part of a larger cell within the UK. And we don't know about their overseas travel or how they might have initially come into contact with this radical extremist ideology that perhaps motivated this attack. It's too early to say. What we do know is this is coming on the heels of two other attacks in the UK, which were clearly inspired by ideology from terrorist organizations. In the Manchester case, we know that individual traveled overseas, and now we know that that individual was in touch with ISIS. Again, too early to say here. It could be a copycat-style attack. It could be in a similar light as the other previous attacks. But ISIS has been calling for these types of attacks. They've been calling for individuals to take knives and take vehicles and to do this type of destruction. So unfortunately, while tragic and horrific, it's not actually surprising.
No, they've said to improvise, but it was the Prime Minister today who came out with language. Again, this is 3 attacks they've had in just 3 months, with the general election on Thursday, saying enough is enough. Take a look.
While we have made significant progress in recent years, there is, to be frank, far too much tolerance of extremism in our country.
So far too much tolerance of extremism, and I know you've been cautious about how this specific instance might be somehow connected to religion. Many people might think that this is, and also the Prime Minister saying that this could be copycat expression. So if she's saying that, enough is enough, and tolerance of extremism, what can be done on a community level? Because I think that's what she's getting at, on a community level, so that when you see something, you say something, that you thwart this kind of behavior.
Sure, you're absolutely right. It needs to take place on a community level, both in terms of law enforcement and the public being vigilant. But what Prime Minister May has also said repeatedly, and what I think is extremely important when looking at these cases, is the role that technology companies are playing in all of this, because there is a lot of propaganda that violates their terms of service, and it's on these platforms, and it's radicalizing individuals in their home countries all over the world. And it's content that, if you report, they will take down, but they have not dealt with it in the most efficient way. And in the UK, they're getting very serious about it, and there is technology. My organization has been promoting technology that exists that can get a lot of this content down. The technology companies do this in the realm of child pornography. They don't currently do this in the realm of counterterrorism. And I think it's really important to recognize that a lot of these individuals aren't necessarily traveling to Mosul, to Raqqa. They're getting this through their phones, the radicalization material, and they're getting it on their home computers. And while that's not going to be a panacea and solve all the drivers, it is one area we've seen dramatically change in a lot of these cases. The online component across most of these cases is a significant factor, and it's a common thread that runs through these cases, whether they're here in the United States or in the UK.
Well, and you get something, like this, you get the phone, you get all this information coming to you, and you act where you are, as opposed to going maybe to where these battlefields are. You take the battle wherever you physically are. But doesn't this also work to the benefit of the intelligence community in the reverse direction, Tara, for people within the fields that you are to drive out folks and get ahead of their plans because of social media?
Well, in terms of, honestly, law enforcement is probably relying more on monitoring individuals that are under sort of surveillance for particular reasons, and that would be more their communications. What we're talking about is the sort of out in the open propaganda that's being used to recruit, that's being used to show graphic, brutal violence, beheading videos, calling on the killings for specific individuals, and basically driving a lot of these attacks. It's no coincidence that these attacks are happening now during Ramadan, during a point in time when ISIS is releasing videos asking people who may or may not be affiliated with ISIS to do these attacks. So whether or not these individuals had direct ties to ISIS, whether they were inspired by ISIS, whether they've never met ISIS but just happened to see the last 2 attacks and think that they should go out and do this, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day, because as we see the tragic loss of, in this case, loss of life and casualties, and the havoc that this type of attack can create in an urban area, soft target, is the same, no matter how affiliated with the terrorist group the individual
devastating
is.
loss of life, and the ripple effect that this has is large for the community of London, and we know we're just 2 weeks beyond Manchester, who's still reeling, trying to recover from the